So in this video we're going to start talking about data structures. Now there's various different types of data structure, but essentially what it is being able to store more than one bit of data into a single variable. And it just allows you to have a different way of organising when you've got slightly more complex needs for how to store data. So we're going to start off by, in small basic, the ones that you really have are arrays, which you can also look at as really being a list, which we'll talk about shortly. They also have stacks, but there's other types of data structures that you don't see in small basic, such as dictionaries and other types, but we'll just be looking at lists in this particular one, or arrays as they're sometimes called. You'll see how they're quite similar in this situation. So I'm going to start off by the best list to start off creating is a shopping list, something that we're all familiar with, and we're going to create the first item in our shopping list. So notice that shopping list is just like a normal variable name, apart from now I'm saying, well, as item 1 I'd like to store something. So why don't we just store cheese? Now please note that the brackets that we're using to say item 1 are square brackets, which is pretty standard in most programming languages for lists and arrays. And we're going to say number 1 equals cheese. We can go and print that shopping list, because of course if we run that now, although we store it, we never actually tell anything to print to the screen, so nothing actually happens. So if we just do a simple print to the screen, and we'll just print shopping list. Now I can print shopping list 1, and if we run that, it will just print cheese. However, if I tell it to print everything in the shopping list, which I agree with you sounds a little bit boring because we've only got one thing, just see that there's a slightly different layout in the way that things get printed. It just says, well, item 1 equals cheese. Now we can go and add items to this shopping list. So let's go and say that we want shopping list item 2 to be, I don't know, let's say bacon. Getting to a nice sandwich now. And you can notice that it says item 1 is cheese, item 2 is bacon. It's okay for the user to read it like that. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world, but it works. I'm now going to look at a situation where what happens if I want to change an item in the list. So in this situation we store items 1 and 2. We then print to the screen what's in the shopping list. Now I can say, well, actually I changed my mind. I want the second item to be fish. So if I and then print it again, you'll notice that in the first instance we've got cheese and bacon, and we've written over the top of the bacon that we did have, and now we've got fish the second time we print. You can also delete things from the list. This confused me initially, but you actually just put open speech marks, close speech marks with nothing inside, no space or anything. I thought initially that this would just keep a second position, but it would just not have a value to it. But as you can see, it doesn't even think there's a second item here anymore. It just says, right, no, there's no thing stored under item 2. So that completely deletes things just by setting the item to blank. So these are quite useful tools to be able to use with lists. So we talked about earlier on that I didn't really like the way that lists printed things out. I mean, if I wanted to print everything in this list, yes, I can just print shopping list, but it just doesn't look very tidy. Let's just add an extra item. And if I wanted to make it look tidier, of course I could say I'm going to print item 1 in the list. I could then say I want to print item 2 in the list and 3 in the list. We'll just change these numbers as we go. Of course this isn't great. We're doing copying and pasting, which just gives us room for errors, which is never a great thing. And sure enough, that is how I want it printed, but it just seems like, well, every time I add an item to my shopping list, I'm now going to have to add another line of code to say to print that extra item. I don't know, let's have a monkey in our shopping list. Why not? So what can we do to resolve this? Well, why don't we use a for loop, which we've got some experience of using previously, to say for I equals, now remember I is just a variable name, you could call this for item if you wish. For item equals 1, 2, 4, because we've got 4 items in our list, we would like to first of all indent just to make it clear that this is inside the for loop, and end our for loop. For items 1 to 4, write shopping list 1. Well, that's clearly just going to write shopping list 4 times, which isn't particularly clever. However, rather than print item 1, why don't we print shopping list item? Remember, item is the variable that changes from 1, next time it runs it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 4. So if I tell it to print shopping list item, well, the first time around item will equal 1, so we'll print item 1. Then we'll print shopping list 2, then we'll print shopping list 3, which will be listed here. And if we run that now, we quite nicely get the 4 things printed, which is quite nice. In some programming languages it's much nicer, because you can say for items in and just say the name of the list, but Small Basic doesn't have that. The nice thing about that is that it will automatically print and run through everything in the list, which is quite nice, the amount of times that the list, the amount of items in that list. We don't have that in Small Basic, but there's a way we can get around it. There's a lot of things that we can do with as well as printing the items. Let's, for example, I'll say afterwards that we're going to say how many items are in the list. TextWindow.WriteLine, and let's say there are, and then I want the number of items. There are number items. So I've created a variable name here. There are a number of items. I'm using concatenation, as we've talked about previously, to string things together. There are that many items in the list. Oops. Now I don't have anything for number of items. I don't know how many number of items there are. So let's create a little line of code that will store number of items for us. So number of items equals, and now we're going to learn a new call that we can do, which is the array command. And if we click on array, you can see the list of all the different things that you can do in an array over here. So I can see if it contains a certain index. Indexes are just the numbers that we've assigned in the data structure. So I can see if we've got a 5th item, for example. I could say get all of the indices, so it would store all of the numbers. I could say get a specific value, so I want to get the value of an item. I could say remove a value, set a value. The one I really want to do here though is get item count. So I want to get the number of items. So array.get item count will tell me how many items there are. Notice that over here I can just learn what this actually does. It just says in brackets we want the array for which the count is requested. So we want to count shopping list. So I'll just go and type in shopping list. So we get the number of items in the shopping list, and then we'll say there are this many items in the shopping list. Cheese, bacon, ham, monkey. There are 4 items in the list. And 4 in the list, not very good grammar in there. So again though, we've got a problem. I'm going to use this idea again shortly. And in fact, I'm just going to move this code to make it clearer for what I'm going to do next in here. So I'm going to say we're going to add to the shopping list, and we'll have shopping list 5 is equal to, let's have some cats as well, normal weekly shop, and we've got 5 items. Now if we run this code now, it says cheese, bacon, ham, monkey, so only 4 items, and it says there are 5 items in the list, which is very clear that we've missed an item. And of course the reason for that is this for loop that says just do items 1 to 4. I really want it to do for items 1 to however many items are in the list. So I can just change this to num items. So now that number of items that we stored earlier on, this will count how many items there are in the list, and then it will run the for loop until we've finished all the items in the list. And sure enough, there we go, we've got right up to cats now as well, saying there's 5 items in the list. So I keep banding around between these terms array and list. A list is very simply a list of items. It's what we would say is one-dimensional. It's just a straight normal list. In mathematics we might look at this as one-dimensional, as in a length in maths is one-dimensional. An area in maths is two-dimensional. And that's because it's got 2 dimensions to it. It's got a width and a depth. Now we're going to make this list into a 2-dimensional array. So I'm going to start looking at our shopping list, as we probably want some food items in our shopping list. So I'm going to have a food section. Now notice that food is a word that the computer can't understand, so even though I'm using it as a label for this array, I still need to put it in speech marks. So I'm going to copy this idea of having a food items, and I'm just going to paste it into the food items. Now, bearing in mind that monkeys and cats aren't really made to be eaten, we're going to change this to be our animals section of our array. These can go back to numbers 1 and 2, and I'm going to lose this for now. Oops. So we've now got these 2-dimensional array, and possibly the best way to show what this will look like when we come to write it is just to go and print shopping list to the screen. And what you can see is, as you may well have already figured out, is that we've got a food section, and in that food section we've got cheese, bacon and ham, and then we've got an animal section in which we've got a monkey and a cat. So it's just a way of structuring data a little bit more closely. I've before used 2-dimensional arrays to store passwords and a username, for example, for different persons. So I had person 1, let's do this as an example. I had person 1 and I stored their username, and then I had still user 1, but I also stored their password. And this way that I was storing in person 1, who has their unique ID of 1, I can store those 2 bits of information. I can also store more bits of information about that user if I wanted to. So I could, for example, just say I wanted to store their first name. But this is a way that I have all of user 1's information stored in effectively one variable called shoppinglist1. And arguably I've got every user's data stored in this one variable shopping list. So these are data structures. They're just ways of organising data in more organised fashions, I guess, and allows you to iterate through and do quite powerful things to multiple entries in a list. It's worth noting, of course, using a for loop on arrays or lists which use words or strings instead of numerical values won't work. You can't say, well, animals add 1 is fish, animals add 2 is my food section, add another one would be my whatever section. So generally using integers where possible are far more valuable for iterating, adding on to when we're looping through different items.